A father walks into his son's hospital room, expecting silence, but finds the bed empty. His heart races, fear sets in, until a nurse whispers 5 words that change everything. Your son woke up today. But it wasn't his voice that brought the boy back. It was a stranger, a quiet girl with duct tape shoes and a head full of stars. And what she said next will leave you breathless. If you're new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us where you are watching from. Now let's jump into the story. Jonas Beckett stepped out of the elevator with his hands tucked deep into his coat pockets. The 7th floor of Pine Hill Children's Hospital looked the same as always. Bright lights overhead, walls painted in cheerful colors that fooled no one. For Jonas, it had become a hallway of routines and quiet dread. 3 times a week, always after work, always in the same navy suit. His tie still knotted from meetings. He could barely remember if nurses didn't greet him anymore. They just nodded. If they saw him, he was part of the furniture now. Another father dragging guilt-like luggage, always with a coffee cup in hand, though he rarely drank it. His shoes clicked softly against the floor as he passed the familiar posters about hope, miracles, community. The words felt hollow today. More so than usual. Room 714 was at the end of the corridor. Always quiet, always dim. Jonas pushed the door open with a slow hand, bracing himself for the same scene he had seen for 60 days straight. His son Leo lying still, wires and tubes wrapped around his small body, machines humming like lullabies no one asked for. But this time the bed was empty. Jonas froze in the doorway, his mind stumbling over itself. The sheets were pulled halfway back. The heart monitor was gone. No quiet beeping, no soft whoosh of the oxygen machine, just silence. Thick and sudden his breath caught, panic rising like cold water. He stepped back into the hall, eyes wide, searching for someone, anyone. His voice cracked as he called out, "Nurse!" Then again, louder, "Nurse!" Footsteps approached fast. A woman in green scrubs came around the corner, calm but alert. "Mr. Beckett," she said gently, reading his name from the badge on his chest. "Your son woke up this morning." Jonas blinked at her, unsure he'd heard right. What?" he whispered, his heart thudding. "Leo," the nurse nodded. "He woke up a few hours ago, groggy but aware. He's being moved to observation." It was sudden, but a good sign. Jonas leaned against the wall, his knees barely holding. The words didn't make sense. It wasn't supposed to happen today. There had been no signs, no change, 60 days of stillness. Then this. "Why didn't anyone call me?" he asked. His voice sharp. Nurse looked apologetic. "It happened early. There was someone with him when he opened his eyes. A girl. She said her name was Nora Santiago. She was reading to him." "Nora," Jonas repeated. The name unfamiliar. "Who is she?" The nurse shrugged slightly. "She said she volunteers in the hospital library, sometimes reads to patients. She wasn't on any official schedule, but we didn't see a reason to stop her. She seemed kind." "And your son responded?" Jonas turned away, his mind racing. How had he missed this? Not just the awakening, but the moment it happened. He was in a boardroom that morning, giving a presentation about quarterly growth, smiling at charts while his son opened his eyes without him. Guilt sat in his stomach like a stone, heavy and hot. And now this name, Nora Santiago. A stranger who had been there for Leo's first breath back into the world. Not him, not family. Just a girl with a book and a voice gentle enough to reach through the silent Seth image, unsettled. Him, not because she was there, but because she had done what he hadn't. Stayed, read, spoken softly into a room most had given up on, including him. He didn't know if it was shame or anger or something messier, something he didn't know how to name. He walked the hallway again, slower now, passing windows without seeing. The world outside was moving. Cars, clouds, people with normal lives, and he felt far from it all. Like the moment had closed a door behind him when he was finally allowed into Leo's new room. The boy was propped slightly upright, his eyelids heavy, still pale, still thin, but awake, truly awake. When Jonas stepped in, Leo turned his head, just a little. But it was enough. "Hey kiddo," Jonas said. His voice softer than he remembered it could be. Leo's lips moved in return. No sound, but there was intention, connection, presence. And Jonas felt something crack open inside his chest. He sat beside the bed, afraid to touch, afraid to ask, afraid of everything he had missed. "You scared me," he whispered. Leo blinked slowly, and maybe, just maybe, there was the hint of a smile still. Jonas couldn't stop thinking about her. This girl, Nora, what had she said? What had she read? What made her stop in his son's room in the first place? And why did it feel like she had reached somewhere Jonas had forgotten how to go outside the hospital? The wind was colder than he expected. He didn't check his phone, didn't respond to messages. He just stood still, watching the sky change color above the parking lot near Santiago. The name stayed with him, a whisper in his thoughts, a shadow. He didn't know how to chase, not yet. The school bell rang with a tired clang, and students spilled out into the late afternoon sun, laughing, shouting, shoving their backpacks onto tired shoulders. Jonas Beckett stood across the street, feeling like a man who had arrived somewhere uninvited. He scanned the crowd without knowing who he was looking for. Just a name in his pocket and a question in his heart. And he saw her. Nora Santiago didn't stand out. She wasn't loud. She didn't walk in a pack. Her shoes were scuffed at the edges, the laces frayed. Her jeans had been patched near the knee, and the strap on her backpack was held together with a strip of silver duct tape. She walked with a kind of quiet purpose, like someone who didn't expect anyone to notice her, and didn't need them to. Jonas stepped forward, not too fast, not wanting to startle her. "Nora," he said, his voice low, careful. She stopped, turned, and met his eyes without fear, just a steady gaze, like she had already figured out who he was before he said the next words. "I'm Leo's dad," he added. "Jonas." She nodded once, then looked past him like she was checking the sky. "Okay," she said simply. "Can I talk to you?" he asked. She shifted her backpack, glanced around the sidewalk, then said, "We're already talking." He almost smiled, not because she was trying to be funny, but because there was no effort in her voice. No fear either, just fact, honesty wrapped in quiet. "I wanted to thank you," he said, but she cut him off before he could finish. "You don't have to," she replied. "I didn't do anything special, I just read to him. You were there when he woke up," he said, his voice softer now. "I wasn't," Nora shrugged. "I didn't plan it. I was reading about stars, constellations and galaxies, from a book in the hospital library. It's my favorite one. I just sat there." Then he opened his eyes. Jonas nodded slowly, trying to picture it, trying to understand how this quiet girl had wandered into the most important moment of his son's life and treated it like something ordinary. She hadn't taken credit, hadn't made it a story about her. She had just been there. "Why did you choose that room?" he asked. "Why Leo?" She looked at him then, really looked, and said, "Because he was alone." The words hit him harder than anything he had expected. They were simple, but they carried weight, like she had dropped a pebble into his chest, and it was still sinking. They walked toward the bus stop together, without planning to, without talking much more. He glanced at her again and noticed the way she stood, shoulders squared, but not tense, like she had grown used to standing still while the world moved around her. "Do you like space?" he asked, and she nodded. "It's quiet but not empty. There's meaning even in the dark. Everything's connected, even if you can't see it." Yet, he didn't know how to respond to that, so he just let the silence hang between them like a thread neither of them wanted to pull. "You said your mom works a lot," he said after a minute. Nora gave a half nod. "She cleans offices mostly at night. I go to the hospital sometimes while she works. The nurses don't really stop me." He felt something twist in his chest again, not pity, something heavier, like guilt that had finally found its shape. This girl had no reason to be there, no obligation, and yet she had been more present in his son's recovery than he had. "Does she know you visit?" he asked. "Sort of," Nora replied. I don't tell her much. She already worries too much about everything. When the bus pulled up, she stepped forward, then paused, turning back slightly toward him. You don't have to follow me or check on me or anything, she said. I'm not looking for anything from you. Her voice was even not defensive, just clear. Like she knew how easily people misread kindness. Jonas nodded. I know, he said quietly. I'm just trying to understand. She looked at him for a long moment, then said, lonely people recognize each other, that's all. Then she stepped onto the bus, took a seat by the window, and didn't look back. He watched the bus disappear, the taillights fading, and stood there on the curb like a man holding something too fragile to name later that week. He saw her again, this time inside Leo's hospital room, her backpack slung over one shoulder, a piece of folded paper in her hand. She sat beside Leo. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Jonas stood in the doorway and didn't interrupt. She opened the paper slowly, smoothing the edges. I made you something, she told Leo. A star chart, the northern sky mostly. Leo stared at it with wide eyes. The room quiet except for the soft hum of the machines. She pointed to the paper. That's Vega. And that's Deneb. And this, she paused. This one is yours. It's not real. But it could be. Leo smiled, faint and small but real. Jonas watched as the boy he thought he'd lost started to glow from the inside. Lit not by science or treatment, but by something much simpler. Narash didn't ask for attention, didn't wait for praise. She just gave what she had. Presence, wonder, and a piece of the universe in folded paper. Jonas sat in the hallway after she left, holding the star chart she'd given his son, feeling for the first time in a long time that maybe the sky above them was wide enough to carry more than one kind of healing. The rain had started early that morning, soft at first, then heavier as the sky turned from gray to steel. Jonas parked outside the school again. This time not out of curiosity, but out of concern. Nora hadn't been to the hospital in 3 days. Leo asked about her each time, always with the same question in his tired voice. Is she coming today? The first day Jonas had said yes without thinking. The second day he had said maybe. By the third day, he stopped answering. Instead he sat beside his son and watched the way the boy's eyes drifted toward the window, waiting for something that didn't arrive. Inside the school office, he spoke to the receptionist, then the janitor's room, then a teacher who remembered Nora always having a book in her lap during lunch. But no one had seen her lately. Maybe something at home, someone suggested. Her grandma's not well sometimes. Jonas left the school with more questions than answers. He didn't know where she lived, didn't even know her full story. Just a name and a handful of quiet memories. The girl who read about stars and gave his son back his smile. Later that afternoon, he drove back again, this time during dismissal. The parking lot was crowded, umbrellas bobbing like jellyfish, kids laughing, shouting, running for buses. Jonas scanned the sidewalk until he saw someone sitting alone near the far corner. Her knees pulled to her chest, her hood drawn low. It was Nora. He walked over slowly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up once as he approached, then dropped her head back down. She wasn't crying, but her silence felt heavier than any sound. He sat beside her without a word, letting the rain tap softly on the concrete around them. After a while, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. They came to our apartment. Jonas turned toward her, listening without interrupting. 2 agents, she continued, said. They were doing routine checks. They asked questions about my grandma, about where she was from, about rent, about papers. They didn't take her, but they might come back. She picked at the sleeve of her hoodie, a loose thread wrapped around her finger. I didn't want to go to the hospital like this, she added. Not scared, not messy. Jonas didn't respond right away. He felt helpless, the kind of helpless that comes from realizing the world can press too hard on the small and the quiet. That fear can live even in places that should feel safe, you being there. He finally said, for Leo, for me, that wasn't nothing. And this, he nodded gently toward her, "This isn't something you should carry alone." She didn't reply, but she didn't move away either after a while. She stood up slowly, brushing off her backpack. She didn't thank him, didn't explain more. She just looked at him for a second, like she wanted to believe him, but wasn't sure how. The next day, Nora returned to the hospital. Didn't say much when she arrived, just nodded at Jonas and walked into the room like she always had. Her presence was quiet, but it filled the space like warmth. Leo looked up the moment she entered, and his face changed. Not wide with excitement, but calm, steady. Like something had returned that made the world feel right again. She pulled a folded paper from her backpack and sat beside him. "I made a new chart," she said, her voice soft but clear. "This one has the southern sky, the hidden part. The part we can't see unless we look from somewhere else." Jonas stood by the door, watching the way she unfolded each corner, how she spoke about stars like they were friends, and how Leo listened with the kind of focus he had never given a doctor or a screen. Nora didn't talk to impress. She didn't ask for anything. She simply shared what she loved, and in doing so, gave Leo something more than information. She gave him peace. At the hospital room, once full of machines and tension, now felt different. It had color, laughter, tiny scraps of paper stars taped to the window, reminders that not everything healing had to be loud or clinical outside the room. Jonas found himself speaking with Nora's grandmother for the first time. Her name was Beatrice, but everyone called her Mrs. B. She wore a faded sweater and a smile that looked tired but kind. "Nora doesn't talk much," she said, "but when she does, it's because it matters." Jonas nodded, listening more than speaking. He asked about the visit from the agents, about the apartment, about what they needed. Mrs. B waved a hand gently. "We manage," she said. "We've always managed." Jonas offered help, carefully, respectfully, but she shook her head. "We don't take handouts, not because of pride, but because we've learned to move quiet, not loud." He understood more than he wanted to admit. Understood that sometimes help feels like a spotlight, when all you want is a shadow to breathe in. So he didn't push. But he made a quiet call that evening to someone he knew, a friend who worked with families like theirs, not to fix it all, but to at least begin the process of protection, of security, of dignity. In the days that followed, Nora kept coming back, and each visit brought something new. A new chart, a new story, a new fold of the universe shared between two people who had built a quiet world no one else could enter. Jonas kept watching. Not from a distance anymore, but not too close either. He knew now his job wasn't to replace what Nora had given. It was to make space for it to grow, and in that quiet, in those spaces between charts and words, echoes began to fill the air. Not of machines or voices, but of presence, steady and soft, enough to carry a boy back into the world. The day Nora received the envelope, the world felt unusually still. It came in the mail with no warning. Just her name written in neat letters and a university logo in the corner. She opened it slowly, her fingers shaking a little. Inside was a letter offering her a place in a summer program for young astronomers. It was real. It was rare. And she had been chosen. She held it for a long time before showing anyone. When she finally gave it to her grandmother, Mrs. B read it twice before smiling with quiet pride. "They finally saw what I've always known," she said. But Nora wasn't smiling, her thoughts already full of questions. What if leaving caused problems? What if her spot was taken because of her background? What if someone asked too many questions? What if her being seen brought more risk than reward? Jonas heard about it through the school. Not from Nora. She hadn't mentioned it at the hospital, hadn't said a word, just kept folding her stars and reading her books like everything was the same. But Jonas knew this meant something bigger, something worth celebrating. Found her after school, standing by the fence near the parking lot, her backpack heavy and her shoulders low. He didn't ask her why she hadn't told anyone. He just held out the printout from the university. "You're going," he said gently, "and you're not going alone." Nora didn't answer at first. She looked down at the paper, then up at him. "What if I mess it up? she said, her voice small. What if they expect someone smarter, someone more prepared? Jonas shook his head. They picked you because you already have what they can't teach. You notice things others miss. You care without being told to. And you make the stars feel like home. The next evening, Jonas invited Nora and Mrs. B to dinner, just something simple. A way to say thank you without making it feel like a ceremony. Mrs. B brought homemade bread wrapped in a towel, and Nora carried a folder full of new star charts for Leo had been working on something too. A surprise. He handed it to Nora before they sat down. A small, folded map of constellations with one star drawn brighter than the rest. That one's you, he said. I called it Nora Nova, she smiled. Not wide, but deep. Like something warm had opened inside her chest. Thank you, she whispered. You helped me find the sky again. After dinner, they all stepped outside to the backyard. The night was clear, and Jonas had set up a telescope he'd finally taken out of the box. Nora adjusted the lens with careful hands, showing Leo how to find Orion and Vega, and Cassiopeia's B sat quietly in a chair near the porch, watching the two of them talk. In their quiet shared language, Jonas stood beside her, hands in his pockets. You raised someone extraordinary, he said. She's always been extraordinary, Mrs. B replied. Most people just don't look close enough to see it. When the day of departure came, the four of them drove to the small university bus station together. Other kids waited with suitcases and parents full of nerves and pride. Nora stood quietly, her backpack slung over both shoulders. Her fingers wrapped around the locket Leo had given her the night before. It's not real silver, Leo had said, but the stars inside are real. I checked twice. She hugged him tightly, whispering something in his ear that made him nod and hold on just a little longer. Then she hugged Mrs. B, resting her forehead against her grandmother's for a moment without speaking. Finally, she turned to Jonas. He thought she might say goodbye, but she didn't. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and handed him a small folded note. No envelope, no signature, just a few words on lined paper. Then she climbed aboard the bus and found a seat by the window as the bus pulled away. Jonas unfolded the note and read it slowly. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for not turning away. He folded it again, carefully, and tucked it into the inside pocket of his jacket. Not with his keys or phone or wallet, but in the space he kept closest to his heart. Life moved on after that, but not in the same way. Leo continued to heal, stronger each day. His therapy became less about movement and more about confidence. Jonas started working fewer hours, taking longer walks, learning how to be present without checking his phone every 5 minutes. Nora sent letters from the university, sometimes drawings, sometimes small facts about the stars she studied, always ending with a question for Leo to answer. Do you think Betelgeuse is still shining? What would you name your own constellation? Can silence feel warm? The letters became something they both looked forward to. Reminders that distance didn't have to mean disappearance. And sometimes late at night, Jonas would step outside and look up at the sky, not searching for anything specific, just standing there in the quiet, remembering how one girl had brought the stars back into their lives with nothing more than her voice, her kindness, and a pocket full of paper. And he would whisper softly into the dark sky above, thank you for reminding us that even in the quiet, we are never alone.